Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. All right, so we are going to be doing a very interesting sutra today. A sutra that also coincides with what we've been learning in the Abhidhamma as well, with regards to volition, structure of volition, conditional support, and facilitation support, right? So let's get to it. Let me share the screen with everyone. Right. So the Cetanā Sutra, these 3 Cetanā Sutras, so we'll be going through 3 sutras, right? And the 3 Cetanā Sutras deals with volition, the Chaitasika of volition, or the energy of volition in this regard, because we are discussing the sutras, and how volition, right, gives rise to, first of all, karmas, and also since goes into the latent tendencies which can then affect rebirth as well, right? So we'll be going through 3 sutras with regards to the 3 Cetanā Sutras, or the discourses on volition. Right.
Excuse me, Bhante, can you enlarge the screen a bit, please?
Yes, yes, of course, Jata. I will.
Thank you.
How is that, Sujata?
That's fine. Thank you, Bhante. Lovely.
All right. So,
I'm sorry, Bhante, which page are we on?
we are on
I just print 59.
50.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Bhante. Yeah.
Now, shall we start?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
59. Cetanā Sutta. Bhikkhus, what one intends and what one plans and has latent tendency, anusaya. This is a mental basis for the support for consciousness. This is a mental basis for support, for the support for consciousness, right? The support for consciousness. What one intends. What one intends. Here includes all wholesome and unwholesome volition of the 3 planes. What one intends talks about the volition, Cetanā, the 3 types of Cetanā, right? And then what one plans, the mental fabrications of craving and views, tanha, ditthi, kapha, in the 8 chittas accompanied by greed. The fabrications of views only occur in the 4 associated with views, right? The mental fabrications of craving and views, right? So this is talking about within the mind, within a consciousness, the continuum of consciousness is ensured by the energies that are present, which allows the mind to continuously cling on to the aramana, or the object, right? That object is whatever the volition at the moment intends, right? I mean, we know this already, don't we? Right? So to put a bit more context into it, just as we would take, if we are living in a city, we have the air, but is the air simply just air? It is not, specifically not at this moment in time. There's pollution, there's dust in the air. There are sort of signal radiation in the air, 5G, 4G, right? I mean, it is all around us, isn't it? But however, we do not see these things, or we might not really sort of grasp, that there is pollution if it is not over a certain level. We might not grasp that there is so much within the air that we breathe. In the same manner, when there is a volition, a consciousness, right? Then with this consciousness, the going or the continuation of this consciousness is ensured by many. There are different energies in support of this, right? One is, of course, the tanha, and that which keeps us clung on to that object, which is now grasped and bounded by the tanha, titti, right? In Paticcasamuppada, we know tanha and avidya, isn't it? Right? Now, and has latent tendency. That is, latent tendency is anusaya. One habitually does something, whether out of unwholesome motivation or wholesome motivation, or even without intention, right? Or even without intention. Now, the way that anusaya has been explained here, it is important to note that anusaya, whilst we discuss it as a latent tendency, as we grow older, and as our awareness, if not as, but if our awareness drains, right? Awareness becomes weaker, and through practice, we have not created a strong connection and foundation with the Dhamma. What often happens is the anusaya gives or comes or manifests itself more often to the top of our sort of functional sort of presence, right? The anusaya sort of comes up to our sort of functional presence. We see this often now with people who are dementing, right? With people who are dementing, we see that sometimes if these people are, if they were sort of difficult characters, or characters who, lived with a certain sort of, temperamental sort of structure, earlier they have the sense of presence to be able to control that, to know, to have or grasp a time and place. But with positions, or when people are dementing and going through that process, people lose that strength. And what comes up is something which is connected to the anusaya, giving rise to those temperaments in a far stronger manner, and in a manner that now it can't be controlled also. It's very difficult to control, right? Anusaya, and what we will learn is on how now anusaya, having come up to the surface, how it controls what happens next, right? How it controls what happens next. Now, let us continue. This is a mental basis, right? A mental basis for the support for consciousness. Vinyanayata yamkisi padanamak venawa. Right? Vinyanayata yamkisi padanamak venawa. What is the mental basis? Right? Mental basis. These various states, such as volition, become a condition. For here the word arambana is intended as condition, right, does not signify an object of consciousness, and the usual meaning in the Abhidhamma, right? Which is the usual meaning in the Abhidhamma. For the support for consciousness, again, vinyan for the consciousness, it becomes a supporting condition there, right? When there is a mental basis, consciousness is established. When there is a mental basis, consciousness is established. Do you understand what that means? Right? When there is something to be cognized, a condition, right? Sujata?
I couldn't understand that when you said that, Bhante.
Yes.
I wanted to say no.
When there is a mental basis, what this means is, we know when there is a rupa rammana, an object of rupa, right? When there is an object of rupa present at the pasada, right? Supported by mansikara, arammana, mansikara, aloka, and what's that other one? Arammana, aloka, mansikara, and pasada rupa. And pasada rupa, when these four are present, the object, the arammana, is present. Is that clear? Is that clear, everyone? Again, when the pasada rupa, right, mean the physical base, chakku, sota, gana, jibha, kaya, when one is present, right, aram, pasada rupa, aram, when there's an object to be cognized. With regards to sight, aloka, without light, there is no object, right? And then mansikara, satya, awareness. When these four are present, there is an object that can be cognized. This object is a mental base, a condition for consciousness to be established. Is that clear? For consciousness to be established. Without that object, the chakku vinyana will not arise. Is that clear? Without which the chakku vinyana will not arise. Right? So because there is a pasada, the object, the aloka, the chakku vinyana arises. Is that clear? Do you get it, everyone? Yeah? Sujata, I hope that it is clear now. Yes, Shriyan?
I got it. Thank you, Bhante.
Good.
Passa vedana sanya. Vinyana. Yeah.
Passa vedana. No. Why are you going there? We are talking about the pasada rupa and the aramana. The mental basis. Right? Let's keep it at that position for now.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
The mental basis for the cognition, for the consciousness to arise. Right? Dakinna deyak නැත්තං චක්කු විඤ්ඤාණය හටගන්නේ නැහැ. දකින්න දෙයක් නැත්තං පංචද්වාර වජන හටගන්නේ නැහැ. මනෝද්වාර වජන හටගන්නේ නැහැ. චක්කු විඤ්ඤාණය හටගන්නෙත් නැහැ. Right?
The object has to be there. Yes.
There has to be a contact between the object.
Yes.
Object and the light. Light has to be there. Object
and the mansikara. You know, the object is there, the light is there. If the mansikara is not there, the mansikara as well. The sense of presence of mind.
Yeah.
Right? When there is a mental basis, consciousness is established. Right? Here, we'll look at this as well. When there is a mental basis, there is the establishing of consciousness. Here, arammana has an early non-technical sense, meaning simply condition for the mind to arise. Right? Condition for the mind to arise. Now, what we know is the Panchupadana skandha, isn't it? The five aggregates of clinging. Now, in the 5 aggregates of clinging, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Rupayakut metana තියෙනවා. There is Rupa, there is Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and there's Vijnana as well, isn't it? Right? Now, something is missing in this 5. What is that? This establishing. What does that mean? The object, right, which is comprehended, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, right? Sankhara, Vijnana takes the object, but now how does the object and the 5 aggregates of clinging, or the 5 aggregates, now sort of unite? It's to the clinging. That is like the pollution in the air. It can't be separated at this moment. Avijja, Tanha. Supported by those two, the upadana, or that sense of establishing ourselves with the object, happens. Yeah? Establishing ourselves with the object happens. Okay? So, which serves as then the foundation for that connection. What is that connection? Now, self. Self has arisen, supporting now this unity, this connection with this object which is comprehended. Right? Object which is comprehended. We would see the final result of the processes, which is, we know there are multiple streams of consciousness, has to run to cognize an object, to understand an object, right? To understand an object. Now, we as mundane human beings, when we initially start thinking in accordance with the Dhamma teachings, what we initially just realize or simply take in is the fact of I have clung on to the final object. Do you understand? That's what we take, isn't it? If it is a person, or if it is like a physical thing, right? A physical thing. This is a bottle. I'm clinging on to the bottle. That is what we take. However, clinging has arisen in every position, every chittakkana, from the beginning of cognition to the conclusion of the object. Do you understand? The clinging has arisen. If there are 17 mind moments, 17, let us say 17 mind moments, and it takes us 5 to 8, right? 5 to 8. So if we take 8, right? 8 series or 8 VTs, then clinging has influenced 136, 17 into 8, 136 states of mind, which has now like some sort of like, the caterpillars like with 1,000 legs.
This is the problem. We have only one.
Centipede, right? Like a centipede, right? And just imagine a centipede, or something similar with 1,000 legs. Just imagine those 1,000 legs rooting itself into the object. That is what we do. But we would only sort of realize, because of we would only first see, I have clung on to the bottle, but truly I have clung on to every aspect of this bottle, starting from its color to its shape, to its sort of logo, to its sort of everything. Do you understand? Right? So, moving on. Dil, you have something to ask, yes?
Tell you at that point, Bhante, you want to disturb the class. What the 6 cognitive process, the IDO process, the Chakupasad, the visible object, the Aloka and attention, is page 151 for her to refer to, Bhante. Because she was talking of the aggregates about Vijnana, but what we are mentioning is the idea process, the Chakkuprasada, Ruparamana, Aloka, and Manasikara is in page 151 of our book, Bhante.
Okay, Abhidhamma book, right?
Yes, if that is given there, Bhante. And now when you're talking about clinging, you're talking of Upadana. So it's not the Tanakra. Yeah.
Upadana is the Panchupadana.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. So it's not the craving and the Tanna which we talked about before. Now we've gone to the Upadana because it's Panchupadana Skandha. So we've gone from craving to clinging now.
Well, yes, take it as that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Now, coming back, right? When that consciousness is established and grows therein, there is further continued arising of rebirth, right? Continued arising of rebirth. So what is intended? When that consciousness has a support and grows, when having driven on karma, it has grown and produced roots through its ability to cause rebirth. Hence, there is further arising of rebirth. Hence, there is further arising of rebirth. Right. Hence, there is further arising of rebirth, meaning we are creating the sankharas, the energies, the karmas, whatever or however we might choose to, or which word we might choose to use. We are creating the energies that essentially mold our rebirth, next existence, right? Our next existence. Now, when we think about, right, what it is saying is now rebirth or birth is after, right, upadana paccaya bhavo, bhava paccaya jati, right, bhava paccaya jati, which is the 11th. Jati paccaya jara maranang soka parideva dukkha domanassa upayasa. Right? So now, earlier what we sort of looked at was avidya paccaya tanha, and then the series goes on up until jati jara marana adi dukkha. Right? Within this sutra now, what it is sort of talking about is a connection between what? Consciousness to rebirth. Do you understand? Does that make sense, everyone? Let me pull up the chart. What can you see on my screen, please? Nothing? Okay. Here. Right? Now, here. You see the chart, yeah? Now, within this chart, right, we went from avidya paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya vinyana, which is consciousness, paccaya nama rupa salayatana passa vedana, vedana paccaya tanha, paccaya upadana paccaya bhavo, bhava paccaya jati, jati paccaya jara marana soka parideva dukkha domanassa upayasa. Right? That was what we learned. This sutra is insinuating a connection between consciousness, right? So we draw a line from consciousness to birth. Do you understand? ඒ කියන්නේ විඥාණය කොහොමද අපේ භව ජාතියට විඥාණය කොහොමද අපේ ජාතියට යම්කිසි බලපෑමක් කරන්නේ? ඒ කියන්නේ විඥාණය හේතු කරගෙන හෝ විඥාණය මුල් වෙලා අපේ ජාතිය යම්කිසි විදියකට විනාශ කරනවා. Do you understand? The vinyana affecting jati. But we have vinyana, nama rupa salayatana passa vedana, tanha upadana, bhava before that. Right? That is what it is saying. Right? Let us go back. Is that clear, everyone? Do you get the point? Right? Remember that they spoke about anusaya, right? Right? Okay. You remember, you don't forget that, yeah? So when further continued arising, when the consciousness arises, supported by the object, with the clinging, rooting into the object, continued, it now sort of relates to rebirth, right? It now relates to rebirth. When there is the further arising of rebirth, there further arise birth, right? There further decay and death and sorrow, lamentation, pain, mental pain and despair. Such is the whole mass of suffering. Such is the Mahadukkha Khanda, right? The unconscious arising of suffering. If, right? Now here birth is jati, okay? Now, if bhikkhus, one neither intends nor plans, but if, now look at this, everyone, focus, right? Now, in earlier, it says there is volition. There is volition. There is action. There is planning going on. Planning supported by tanha, clinging, attachment, right? Now it is speaking of a scenario where one neither intends, no volition, no plans, right? No plans. But if one still has latent tendency, this is the mental basis that supports consciousness. Now, this is where it makes a remark that we are not used to. Do you understand? Right? Meaning, what we have learned is kala kala de pala pala de. Right? What we have done, right? As a karma of it, as a result of it, we reap the benefits. If we have lived a good life and all of that, right? Through that consciousness energy, we go through the effects of it. What is this talking about? This is talking about a position where there is no volition, no pre-planning whatsoever, meaning no Cetanā, no tanha, right? But there is latent tendency, meaning not enlightened, right? There is latent enlightened as an arhat, latent tendency, anusaya is present. This anusaya becomes the mental basis, arammana, that supports consciousness. Do you get it? Do you understand what was just said, right? No volition, no clinging, but there is a presence of latent tendency, anusaya, and this anusaya becomes a mental basis, arammana, for your consciousness. Got it? Right? Now, when there is a mental basis, there is support for consciousness. Now, anusaya is becoming the mental basis that supports consciousness, a very dangerous part, might I add, right? When consciousness has a support and it grows, how does it grow? Now, the objects that we are taking through the spirit of the anusaya power. Do you understand? there is further a rising of rebirth. There is further a rising of rebirth. What does that say? Anusaya becoming the mental basis for the consciousness giving rise to rebirth. Do you understand? Right? Now, what is supporting the consciousness is the one in question. It's not the object that was comprehended through volition. It was Anusaya that came into power. Do you understand? Right? When there is a further arising of rebirth, there further arise birth, decay and death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain, despair. Such is the whole arising of the mass of suffering. So now it explains two ways that the dukkha khanda arises. Supported by volition and objects that are taken by that volition, and supported by anusaya and consciousness supported by that anusaya. Do you understand? Is that clear, Shriyani? No? Can't hear. Can't hear, Shriyani.
That means it is anusaya, and anusaya means in that place. Is it the emotion that?
No.
No, latent tendencies. Yeah.
Anusaya, hold on. Anusaya is the spirit, right? Is the spirit of our practices, our tendencies, all that continues to fuel, right? It's like, for example, the earth's, the crust. Yeah, the crust of the earth, which has the minerals and everything that we take from it and build the lives that we have today all across the world, is there. But it is there because of the pressure that has been built, supported by the molten core of the planet. The molten core we do not see, but everything that we find in some sort of gravitational pull, the materials, the raw materials, all of these things that we find, even, the regulation of temperature and all of that is owing to this molten core that we have. The anusaya is like that, right? The anusaya is like that, where we have this position or where we have this essence that has been built, right, through experiences that we have gone through across our journey in samsara. Our journey in samsara, right? Is that clear, Shriyani? So
Yes.
It's not emotion. The emotions fall in the three types of kilesa. We know emotions would fall into anusaya, pariuttana, vitikama, isn't it? Emotions are pariuttana. It's caused by the anusaya. The physical actions, verbal and physical movement and actions that we do, that we enact, fueled by our emotions and mental states, is called vitikama. Vitya, vitikama, vitya. We forego the mind, not forego. We surpass the mind into physical action, vitikama. Right?
Underlying tendencies, Bhante.
No, latent tendencies.
Latent tendencies, yeah.
Right?
Underlying.
Latent tendencies, right?
Yeah.
Latent, because why don't we use underlying tendencies? Underlying tendencies gives us an idea that the tendencies are there controlling something. It's not controlling anything. Right? It's not control. For example, let us say there is some in our caddies, right, in the kitchen, food is rotting. Right? Food is rotting in the caddy. We've not cleaned it out. Right? Food is rotting in the caddy. We've not cleaned it out. And the caddy, right? Now the food is simply just rotting. its function is not to spread its rot. It's simply going through a process of nature. Right? However, because it is rotting, it is giving a foul smell in the kitchen. Do you understand? Right? So the anusaya, the process of the anusaya is not to essentially make our lives horrible or anything of the sort. It is simply there as we have accumulated this through our tanha, as we journey through life. Is that clear? Right?
Until normally we always talk of Cetanā aham bhikkhave kammam vadami. That's the other one, that the Cetanā is there, then you have kamma. Now we are talking about a new aspect of it, about how the anusaya. Yeah. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
So those days we just say Cetanā aham bhikkhave kammam vadami. If there is intention, you are kamma. But we have, for the first time, we are seeing how anusaya, the latent tendencies, can get directly rise to give rise to without, and jumping from
how we can affect the jati.
Yeah. So we are now jumping. Now, if you look at the Paticcasamuppada, we are saying avidya paccaya sankhara paccaya vijnana. From that consciousness now, we are going to jati, which is quite lower down, Bhante.
We are talking about the possibility that anusaya has a direct effect or a relation to jati.
Yeah. Okay, Bhante. Thank you.
Tamsiri, do you want to say something?
Yes, Bhante. When it comes to, when you say further arising of rebirth, here you are talking about actually instantaneous rebirth in the process of consciousness, right? Because what I heard this interpretations before was actually this is the consciousness process or the thought process or application of Paticcasamuppada in the thought process, right? So when they say, when this particular person says further arising of rebirth, that means it's an instantaneous rebirth in the thought process. Yeah.
Yes, it's talking about an instantaneous rebirth.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. It's talking about, wait, can you define instantaneous rebirth?
That means every moment, every chittakshana, we will be conscious. With the consciousness, we will be born again. This is the rebirth. Rebirth of consciousness. The upada titi banga, and immediately after that, there'll be a upada titi and banga. So that rebirth you are talking about, yeah?
I think we can take both.
Both.
දෙකම ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ කියන්නේ කාය මරණ and කනික මරණ.
Yeah, okay.
Both.
Okay. Yeah.
Because කාය මරණ and කනික මරණ. Because it is speaking about both, and we will come to that.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the latent tendency can affect the moment, but it can also affect kāya marana patisandhi.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Kāya marana patisandhi.
Yeah.
Shriyani, you want to say something?
No, Bhante, no.
Okay. The unconscious. Okay. Further continued arise. Make a Hari. Yes. The ending of suffering. But bhikkhus, insofar as one neither intends nor plans, and if one has no latent tendency, then there is no mental basis for the support for consciousness again. But bhikkhus, insofar as one neither intends nor plans, and if one has no latent tendency, then there is no mental basis for the support of consciousness. Right? There is no mental basis for consciousness. When there is no mental basis, consciousness is not established. When consciousness is not established and does not grow, There is no further rising of rebirth. What are we talking about? We are talking about enlightenment. Right? A position of enlightenment where a consciousness does not link or creates further sankharas attributing to self within the objects that are cognized. Right? Within the objects that are cognized. When there is no further arising of rebirth, there ends further birth, decay, and death and sorrow. Lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, and despair. Such is the ending of this whole mass of suffering. This whole mass of suffering, right? This whole mass of suffering. Now, yes. So Padma is asking, Bhante, can you give an everyday example of latent tendency? Wow. How am I supposed to do that? An everyday example of latent tendency. Okay. Let me think about that, Padma. Can anyone think of something? How can we give an everyday example of latent tendency?
Take, for example, Bhante, if you take the desire for sensory desire, right? We like to see something and enjoy it, right? And then there's a taint of sensory
Kama Chanda Anusaya.
Kama Chanda, yeah.
Kama Chanda Anusaya.
Anusaya.
But the thing is, when we talk about the liking to see, right? Seeing is vitikama and liking to see is pariyuttana.
Yeah. But no, but before that, you were
yes, the process is fueled by anusaya.
Anusaya. You had to go back to the anusaya level.
Okay.
Back to
sort
of backward movement and see anusaya. Anusaya is the one actually brings you to next stage. Right? So it's anusaya is a hidden, latent. It's not visible.
It's
right?
not visible.
Yeah.
It's not visible. So it is like that sort of it is like that tanha in suffering.
Yeah.
You know, the continuous sorting for, looking forward to, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That essence. So we have to sort of then deduce between the action of looking forward to and the supporting energy of looking forward to. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that clear, everyone? Meaning, okay. The morsel of food that is being consumed, right? I want to eat, right? I want to experience the food. And I've already experienced and I'm continuing to experience it with every morsel that I put into my mouth, right? The action of me sort of, you know, if I'm eating with my hands or spoon or whatever, spooning food into my mouth is pariyuttana. Sorry, vitikama. The desire to eat is pariyuttana. Right? Anusaya is the energy that fuels the continuous pushing of tanha, that gives the mind the need to eat, which we cannot see. We see the need to eat, mata kanna ona, mata badini. Right? That is what we see. Right? Oh, this is tasty. Let me finish the whole bowl or whole plate of food. Right? That is what is, but that is pariyuttana. That is pariyuttana, yes. That is within the mind. That is what you see, right? However, anusaya is that which fuels the energy of tanha, right? So the anusaya is not connected to the food. Anusaya is connected to the craving, the clinging, the aversion, the tanha, the raga. Do you understand? Which then, that is what thirsts. That is what craves. Right? So if an object, and we know this how, මොකද සමහරවිට බඩක් දැන් පිරීලා ඉවරයි. ඉඩක් නැහැ බඩේ. ඒ තාම මේ කනවා. Right? Still you're eating. You're physically, sometimes you're physically not capable of, your stomach is full. Still you're eating. Right? Still you're eating, and you have no, and people who are onlookers, including yourself, have no idea where this food is going to. Right? Where this food is going to. Still you're eating. Yeah. That is where the thirsting, right? That essence, it's not the thought, man kanna make a rahai. No, that is pariyuttana. That's the result of the anusaya. The anusaya is not connected to the food. It's connected to the sheer emotion, the thought, what gives rise to that, what gives rise to something in the spirit of kama chanda anusaya. වෙනමතින අනුසය වර්ග කාමචන්ද අනුසය ditthi අනුසය කාමචන්ද අනුසය ditthi අනුසය භාව please tell Damsiri. කාමාසව භාවාසව ditthාසව අවිජ්ජාසව, right? Those four, that is the spirit that they, so this sort of essence of kama chanda asava is not, it doesn't care about the cars, it doesn't care about the clothes or the beauty or the vanity, or it doesn't care about any of that. Ashrava is more timeless, it's timeless. Yeah. Right? Its essence is not connected to the petty things that we choose to cling on to. It simply connects to the essence. That is why everyone, now, when we are younger, with our, faces and all of that, we cling. We think we are beautiful and all of that. But as we grow old and our skin wrinkles up and goes through the natural processes, do we stop clinging? No, we still cling. Do you understand what I mean? Right? So the anusaya does not link up to the young skin or the old skin. It refers to simply the essence of clinging. Kama chanda, kamaya. Do you understand? Is that clear? Yeah?
Bhante, can I explain them? Can I try to see with the way I understand? Now, okay. For example, I like apple pies, right? But I like apple pies. But okay. when I discuss with you Dhamma, I completely don't think about apple pies, right? But okay. Within me, that tendency is there, but it's not apparent, right? I love apple pie, but when I discuss with you about Dhamma, I don't think about apple pies. But when I see an apple pie, then the pariyuttana comes, and then it activates towards the apple pie. So can that explanation explain the anusaya?
No. I think we have to take it, we have to forward a step further. Which is, step further means we have to push it to front. Yeah. Meaning the apple pie belongs in the pariyuttana. Okay. The apple pie and anything about the apple pie is in the pariyuttana. Okay. Right? That is what we have clung to with self to this birth. in this
Okay.
birth.
Yeah.
Right? We recollect it when we remind ourselves of it.
Yeah.
The Anusaya is what keeps us, is what gives us the toolkit, or what gives us the energy that we then bend and mend into clinging towards apple pie. Yeah.
Bhante?
Why? Hold on one moment, please. Because after this or before this birth, you must have clung on to something completely different. Right? You might have maybe hated apple pie. Who knows? Right? Possibly not. But regardless, right? You might have liked something completely different. Right? That is why Anusaya, from birth to birth, what happens is this sort of essence of clinging happens. However, there's something like this. The characteristic traits that we have, right, as we practice it, right, the older Anusayas and the new Anusayas that we form, the fresh Anusayas that we form in this life, it's like that top layer, right, is like that top layer. That top layer, right, when at moments and times when we lack awareness, that top layer now gives rise or comes forward, right? That we experience with people who are dementing, right? A lot, right? Who grow old without that sense of awareness or whatnot, or sometimes with sense of awareness, but simply because of physiological and all of these biological factors, and maybe even karmas, right? But the biological support system crashing, you know, that level of Anusaya comes into play, right? Without awareness. Now that starts supporting what? Both Kaya Marana and Kanika Marana. That's what is said here. Yeah, Dil?
Bhante, two things I need to ask. So basically what you're saying is the food, like in Dharmasadi's case, it was apple pie. Somebody says that likening to see or to eat the food, that is pariuttana, right? But the Anusaya is the food that energizes, and that is the latent tendency. That's the way you explain in the two differences. Am I right, Bhante?
Please repeat again.
Right. So what you're saying is that now in the case of Dharmasiri's example of the apple pie, that liking to eat the food, or that particular relating to the food, in the case of apple pie, that is the pariuttana. But the food that energizes that is what is the Anusaya, the latent tendency. So that's different. So the Anusaya is not the apple pie. The Anusaya is a latent that energizes, but the apple pie, the liking to eat that thing, that is a pariuttana. That's what you're describing, the difference. Yeah, that's one thing. The second thing is, Bhante, now nobody has explained this to me, so I'm asking you, and I'm sure you're going to, because I get confused. So now we are talking about Anusaya, which is in English you explain it as the latent tendency. But there is another thing that I have heard is the asavas. In English, it's called the taints, the ojasas, the overflows, cankers, all kinds of words. But those asavas also are divided into kamasava and bhavasava and ditthasava and avijjasava, right? Now here you're looking at the Anusaya is also described like that, like the asava. So what is the difference between asavas, which is kamasava, bhavasava, ditthasava, avijjasava, because they're all asavas, and they are in English told tainted, overflows, anchors, cankers and things. And now we are doing anusas, and those anusas also divided to this kamasava. So what is the difference?
The asavas come into being because of the Anusayas.
Asavas come into being because it's a step before the asavas. Is asavas come into being because of the anusayas. So that means you first have anusayas and then the asavas come into being. Is that right? They overflow and come out. That's where they overflow. So what you're basically then, like the English meaning is there. So you have
Why
got,
did you say overflow? Because overflow is ogre.
so I don't know, Bhante, in English, these words are used at different times. I really forget the English. I have seen articles explained that I'm always get confused, Bhante, because different people, something is told by Bhikkhu Bodhi, something else is explained by Bhante Ji, and something else is explained by Sujata Bhante. So I have had asavas explained as taints, ojas, cankers. But anusa is always latent tendencies. But the words you're using for the anusa is also kamasava. It's like the asavas, right? It's and you're using for that also bhavasava. And you're saying dittasava and avijjasava. So those are like the asavas, not 4 different kinds. So, but now, Bhante, you explained to me now very clearly that.
Now, for example, Dil,
Yes. Sorry, Bhante.
now for example, when we take asava, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, asava or an instance of asava is caused by the sort of the rattling of the anusaya.
Rattling of the anusaya causes the asava.
Udaharnak mattameng,
Sure.
a bucket of water,
Right.
let's say with sediments in it, so
Yeah.
the sediments settle,
Yeah. Yes.
at the bottom of the bucket.
Yes.
And you take something and you sort of stir this.
Yes.
So the stirring
Yes.
can be equated to a strong sort of sensory sort of rattling, right? Yeah. So now let's say the instance of someone hiding behind a door and jumping out to scare us, right?
Yeah.
That would come up as a sensory sort of stirring, right? Now what happens is, now because there is no sort of premeditation, nothing, it is something which is unexpected. And what happens? You get scared, you scream. Yeah. Right? You scream, you get scared, it frazzles you. Now the frazzling arises by the sort of the rattling of the anusaya. Right? And that rattling of the anusaya gives rise to the scaring is a taint. The asava, the shouting is caused by the asavana. Do you understand?
So the rattling of the anusaya is what makes you shout, and that shouting is the asava. Is that right?
Yeah. The rattling of the anusaya gives rise to the asava. The asava is that what makes you shout.
Okay. All right, Bhante. So the final thing is the asavas. So now what, in this sutta we are talking about the asavas, isn't it? As opposed to
no, we are talking about the anusaya.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bhante. So in this one we are talking about what is rattling of the asavas. No. So what comes second? What comes second is the rattling. In this sutta we are talking about the anusayas. But what you're explaining is that it's a rattling of the.
So when the bucket is stirred, right, the sediments would sort of, again, it becomes muddy mixed water, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So just so the anusaya, right, the anusaya, when it is sort of stirred, right, you have the asavas. The asavas is that which brings about that sort of scare, that fear, which leads you to now shout in surprise. Right, you shout by surprise because within the anusaya, that sort of fear of life is still there. Right, the fear of life exists because of bhava, because of bhava ashrama. Bhava, these asava.
That's why I said.
Hold on.
Bhante, there are 7 asavas.
Ditta nusaya, kamaraga anusaya.
That's right, Bhante.
That's the word.
That's the word, Bhante.
Ditta nusaya, vichikicha anusaya, kamaraga anusaya, patika anusaya, bhavaraga anusaya, avijja anusaya.
That's right.
And mana anusaya.
Mana anusaya, yeah.
right?
That's right. So that is the subdivisions, because those are all anusas. So
Yes.
these asavas are these kamasava, but which are four different.
So
Thank you, Bhante.
so dittanusaya and vichikicha anusaya gives rise to dittasava.
Say that again, Bhante, again.
Dittanusaya,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Dittanusaya
Yes.
and vichikicha anusaya gives rise to dittanusaya and vichikicha anusaya gives rise to dittasava,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Kamaragaanusaya and patigaanusaya leads to kamasava, right? Bhavaragaanusaya gives rise to bhavasava, right?
Right.
And avijjanusaya and marananusaya leads to avijjasava.
Right.
I'm sorry, not marananusaya,
Manas.
mana.
That's clear. So mana is that, okay, that is that comparison thing. No, whether you're better or not. That mana, that right. Okay, mana.
Right? And that is why so at the Sotapanna stage, we remove the dittasava, right? We get rid of dittasava. dittasava galawagattara passe තමයි අනිත් අර ආසව ඔක්කොම අපිට ගලවන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට කලින් බෑ. Because we are entrenched in what we think is this and that, right? Our views. And these views that we have keeps us within this cycle and prone to the kileshas. The taints. I'm sorry, let me use the correct word, the asavas.
So that is why when that first three goes for Sotapanna, you say Sakkaya, the sense of self, identity, personality goes off. So that's where the dittasava.
Now, for example, Dil, we speak about letting go. Right? And then some would say, me අතරින් කියනවා කොහොමද මේ අතරලා අපි ඉන්නේ මේ මම පුස්සියක් කතා කරනද මන්ද මේ අතරින් කොහොමද ඕම කවුද අපි bills ටික ගෙවන්නේ. Now that is ditti. Right? The fact that we have connected and we assume that this is it. Life is about all of these struggles that we have, or life is having a house that you own, having a good car that you can proudly be behind the wheel of or go to an event of, having good jewelry with a nice sort of gems and jewelry or whatnot, which pops that, gives the idea that you are not destitute or impoverished. We have these views of what life is, what life looks good as. All of that is ditti. At the end of the day, this happiness that we assume in the life that we have is not true, because we know that people who live with so much more simpler ways and means, with so much simpler means, can be happy. There are monks who live under trees who are happier than all of our happinesses combined. Right? That is why now one could say, how does my ditti relate to the fact that how can my ditti how can my views be an illusion? It is a fact that you assume that your views are completely correct at that time. That is what creates that attachment, ditti asava. Right? We do not, it is so difficult for us to comprehend, right? To comprehend that life can be in another manner, right? That there can be a good marriage, right? If different partners mix, or people who traditionally are not married do marry, sometimes we are even stuck at that level, isn't it? Right? A Sinhala Buddhist must marry a Sinhala Buddhist, or else, things like that. All dittis. And all dittis. Now, getting rid of, and we know as people, right, who come පරම්පරාවෙන් මේ හිතන පතන විදිවිලාස එක්ක මේ ජීවත් වෙන මිනිස්සු වශයෙන් අපි දන්නවා කොච්චර අමාරුයිද මේ දේවල් අත්හරින්න අපිට. Right? Now, for example, if you are a professional, right, even though you do not want to sort of, do whatever, the fact that you belong to that tax bracket, right, makes you into a person, So into a person that, you don't want to maybe be there even, right? But if someone needs to send out like even at work, if someone sends out a chit where you're collecting donations or something, and for example, if you're a doctor and if you're a consultant, you're expected to put a certain value, right? And if you need to survive with a good name at work, you need to put that value. Or else people call you stingy. Stingy, Mahakunek. Right? Now that is ditti. Right? That is ditti.
No.
Yeah. So Bhante, Manasa is much later. This Sotapanna Sapna Anagami Tama Manasa. Okay.
No, Mana is at Arahant. Right? So
No,
all of the the ashravas, right? Ashravas are got rid of. Are got rid of.
Yeah.
At Arahanthood. But what is important to realize is the condition. When the condition is present. Now, for example, when you're in the Rupa and the Arupa Loka, right?
Yeah.
There is no karmasa.
Right. Yeah,
right.
That's gone. Yes.
Right. Why? But that does not mean, but the moment you come right down from that plane, karmasa rises again. The condition is important.
You mean after you finish Sotapanna, where you reduce those kamaraga and what the patiga, those two you reduce, but you remove those completely when you come to Sakudagami. But this Ruparaga and Aruparaga and Mana and those things come only when you go to become.
No, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the ashravas remain dormant if there is no enticing arammana to awaken it.
Otherwise it suffers again?
The ashravas can remain dormant if there is no suitable enticing condition to awaken it. If a person cultivates the jhanas and is reborn in the Brahma worlds, to that person during the tenure within the Brahma world, Kama Ashrava will not arise. But that does not mean the person does not have the potential for Kama Asava. But the moment the person dies away from the Brahma Loka and is reborn in the human world again, Kama Asava will arise.
Right.
Because in the Brahma world, the enticing for Kama Asava to arise is not there.
So that means
that is why the Buddha speaks about Gochara, Agochara Bhumi. Sudusu, no sudusu, Kalyana Mitras, Papa Mitras. What does all of this say? It says create an environment where you can work towards your enlightenment. That is what it is saying. Because if you are surrounded by thieves, we will often become thieves ourselves.
So you're talking of somebody in this higher Brahma verse who has not become Sotapanna, because if you are not,
of course.
Right. Okay, great. That's right, Bhante. So in jhanas you can be very high, but the sainthoods you haven't had. That's why you can fall from those very high low to others.
But remember, Kama Raga can be there. Kama Raga can be there even after Sotapanna. Kama Raga
and Vyapada both are only slightly down. After Sakudakami, that those are done. But the other day you told us, Bhante, those days you always told, after you must somehow have Manusya Lokya, because there only you can write. But you told us the other day, and I don't know, they heard you saying, I'm hearing this wrong, and maybe so I ask a pardon. But you told us the other day, now for quite a few decades, this human world, wherever you are born, it's going to have, we are going through these stages where it's going to be very difficult. Droughts and all these other things that are happening, wars and all the horrible things that fires and things that are happening. And therefore, it's better for us then to be born in one of these higher realms. We like the Brahma, because then you have a long spell of time. You can, by the time you, even if you come down, if you are not Sotapanna, where you can come down to the Manusya realm, by that time, this world is very much better. That's what you were saying, Bhante, right? And so, but if we are always listening to Dhamma and doing all this, the chances of being, even if we are not Sotapanna, the chances of us going to be born into the Deva realms and Brahma, which have got more Sotapanna, Sakudab than the human realm, but some of those realms, because we know there are 6 Deva realms and there are 16 Brahma realms. So, but the chances of those realms that you can listen to the Dhamma and things like that, your chances will be more, because you have a tendency that you have spent most of your life meditating and listening to sutras and things. So that will be like a latent tendency. Hopefully you go to one of those realms where you can listen to a Deva or Brahma actually telling, listening to Dhamma, where you have the ability to increase in your gochara or your lineage as well. Am I right?
Yes, I mean, listening to Dhamma is all right, but however, we must understand that listening to Dhamma, if the Sammaditthi, if some can listen, but there might not be Sammaditthi even, right? And some can have Sammaditthi, but they are not putting into practice, where Samma Sankappa does not arise.
Right.
But to a person who has both Sammaditthi and Samma Sankappa, the probability of being reborn in a plane and position where Dhamma can be practiced and pursued is far more likely than a person who has no practice in such practice in such an area.
Bhante, in other words, those people who have developed out of the Noble Eightfold the wisdom factors. So one is the right view and the right understanding. So Nekkhamma Sankappa, yes, the prajna, the wisdom factor. So there's the view which is Sammaditthi as opposed to Sakkayaditthi, but there's also the Samma Sankappa, which is Nekkhamma Sankappa and Avyapada and Avihimsa. So if you're always in that kind of intention or Samma Sankappa, if you're cultivating those two things, then your chances of being, having the intelligence and having the wisdom, which is not just intelligence, but with the wisdom factor is grow more, that wherever you're born in those realms also, that an opportunity for you to progress in the Dhamma is more likely. So that's what we must try and achieve or try to realize in this birth. Yes. Not like those days always telling, I don't want to go to Avlupaloko, or I don't want to go to any of these Brahma worlds, because you don't want to wait there and miss another Buddha. But now we are talking about the reality, which, as you told Bhante 4 years ago, it was quite different. What was happening in this 3-dimensional virtual reality, or what we say absolute reality and conventional reality. The scientists are calling virtual reality, so I get always confused. But so this 3-dimensional world, now it's not going to be so good for an expert when we get born. So that's why you have decided that we should aim somewhere else. Thank you, Bhante.
All right.
Bhante, can I know whether the
just one moment, Shriyani, we have some questions which I have not looked at. Samantha is asking, if Kamma is a seed, consciousness the field, and craving the moisture, where does Anusaya fit in here? If Kamma is a seed, consciousness is the field, and craving the moisture, where does Anusaya fit in here? Where does Anusaya fit in here? Oh, interesting question. My gosh, these questions are so difficult to answer.
That fits in is a latent tendency. It's a latent tendency that with the seed, with the moisture when you put in, right? And the field is consciousness, and Anusaya is the latent tendency. It's neither the consciousness, it's neither the seed, and it's not the seed, which is Kamma. It's not the field, which is consciousness, and the moisture, but it's neither of those, but it is a latent tendency, the energy which is there under the surface, which can, when your mind is weak, which can come on. So it's not those 3 things, but it's the 4th thing, which is a latent tendency. It's not the seed, it's not the consciousness, and it's not the moisture.
Or is it behind the craving? One step before craving. Craving is created because of the Anusaya.
Craving is the moisture.
Yes. Yeah. These are latent, but that is tanha. This is, don't help me, but this is the latent tendency, which can be your tendency to anger, your tendency to be, it doesn't have to be only craving. It can be vyapada, or some people are. I have seen people who were brilliant when they were young. They knew all the Dhamma. They knew all the sutras. They, in previous births, had been in, I don't know, in Anuradhapura Yuga, and they could just tell all
Yeah.
this in Pali.
So
But
I think, Samantha, with regards to this, I feel like now when we would take Kamma and consciousness, the field, and craving the moisture, what is the nature behind what gives rise or allows for moisture to happen, right? The moisture, the energy behind the process of moisture, the energy behind the process of moisture would be the anusaya, right?
Yeah.
Would be the anusaya. Samantha?
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I was just thinking the consciousness. I mean, is a latent tendencies associated with the consciousness? Is it the roots?
The thing is,
Is that different?
latent tendency? Well, we can't say that latent tendency affects the consciousness, right? However, vasana affects the consciousness, not latent tendency, right? I'm sorry, let me reword myself. I made a big mistake there. Vasana, right?
Sorry, what's vasana?
Vasana. What is the English word for vasana?
I have a friend called Vasana. Sorry.
We all have a friend called Vasana, Samantha. We all have a right. But vasana is habit.
Ah,
luck.
But
Is it not the luck?
no. And not that. This is not Shanida Vasana. This is this is not that type of vasana. This vasana, this is not the Sinhala word vasana. This is Pali. Vasana, can someone just try to find the meaning of vasana? This vasana deals with, in samsara, we have done certain things for such a long time that it is ingrained within, in our being, ingrained in our being. But there is no sort of kilesha behind it. It is simply a habitual behavior. The example which is latent is a pot of toddy, right? A pot of toddy, right? Toddy would be in a clay pot, right? Yeah. Not that I would personally know, but it says so in the explanation of the example.
Yeah.
The pot of toddy, and the toddy is removed, hence meaning the kileshas are completely eradicated. Right. However, because the toddy was stored within this sort of clay pot for so long, although you wash it 100 times or 1,000,000 times, still the smell of the toddy reeks in the pot. That is vasana, but it does not get into anything. It simply is there. You understand what I mean?
Yes, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Now,
thanks.
So vasana can get into, or can sort of be connected to the consciousness because it has been there for so long, right? Without any kilesha, right? However, vasana, right? Vasana is a force, an energy. This force or energy is there. It has an effect over the consciousness, as we have just read within the Sutra, right? However, hold on. However, the latent tendency or the consciousness can be independent of latent tendency. That we have to know, because when you are an arahant, you do not have latent tendency.
That's what I was going to ask. How arahants get rid of that latent tendencies?
Arahants get rid of that latent tendency with the backward journey of then simply through what we sort of, Vitikama, Pariuttana, Anusaya. Vitikama controlling through Sila, you tackle Vitikama. Through Samadhi, Vipassana, you tackle Pariuttana.
I think it's that chart that you showed earlier on, isn't it? The opposite. You got Priti, Sukha, Samadhi, then all the four dispassion fading, then Nibbana goes.
Yes. Through that, but basically, I mean, that is a complicated chart. But if you would take the 3 levels of Kilesha, right? I would say Vitikam, Pariuttana, right? Anusaya is tackled by Vipassana.
Yes.
Vidarshana, right? Because Vipassana, you see that energy that is present, which constantly facilitates the action of clinging, right? Breaking the barriers of simple sort of concept and going deeper into the nature of our being.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Into the nature of our being, which is impermanent, which is suffering, which is non-suffering. The suffering aspect, right? Where the tanha exists and constantly sort of makes us want. Right? Constantly makes the situation feel as if it is not the situation that we want to settle with, but the settling situation can arise in the future, or may have, in more dangerous scenarios, may have been in the past, but then because I was an idiot or because I was foolish, I have missed the train kind of situation. Right? That is dukkha. That sort of sense of that vipassana helps us to sort of realize that.
Yeah.
So vipassana is what helps us to get rid of the anusaya.
So yes, seems
Right?
like very difficult to become an arahant, then, isn't it? Yeah.
But Bhante, there was this, but like your smell of toddy in the pot, right, which don't go. Wasn't there a sutta which mentions that there was this arahant who called Vasala, because, and people said, how can he be an arahant? And he said, for so many thousands of births or something, that person had been
Vasala.
Yes, that had been
A Brahmin.
And therefore, so that tendency was there even after so much he became out, but he called him Vasalanda.
Yes. So that is right, Del. Now only Buddhas eradicate vasana.
Yeah.
Because they spend so much more time perfecting. Right? So much more time perfecting the paramis, right?
Because the Wikipedia says, you asked me to look, so I look, vasana, habitual tendencies or dispositions, a term often used synonymously with bija or seed. It is found in Pali and early Sanskrit sources, but comes to prominence with the Yogachara, for whom it denotes a latent energy resulting from actions which are thought to become imprinted in the subject storehouse of consciousness or your vijnana. The accumulation of these habitual tendencies is believed to predispose one to a particular pattern of behavior in the future. I'm just reading from the Wikipedia.
Yeah, it is that habitual impression, and Padma has used the word former impression.
Yeah.
It is vasana gives rise, it arises simply as a habit. Right? There is no qualms behind it. It's simply just the enacting of habit at that sense. Right? Shriyani, you had a question, Shriyani?
Yes, Bhante. This anusaya, can it be like or dislike?
Anusaya, can it be like or dislike?
Dislike, yeah.
Like or dislike? No. However, like and dislike can create an anusaya, but it cannot be anusaya.
Okay.
Meaning,
but when Damsiri said he liked his apple pie,
yeah.
So that then they use the word like there, didn't you?
Yes, that's pariuttana.
That's pariuttana. That's the food.
That's pariuttana.
That is
right. The energy behind the consciousness, right? The energy behind the consciousness which fuels, right? Which fuels the liking or the disliking. That is anusaya, right?
Okay.
That is anusaya. Now let us say we live a life of lavish sort of lavish craving and lavish sort of karma sensual pleasures, right? Now that would then create. It's not the fact of what we cling to. It's the energy of clinging that then goes into creating a fresh layer of anusaya on top of the old. Yeah, further strengthening the anusaya. And as the anusaya is further strengthened, the prapanchas are enforced stronger. Right? Tanha, Ditthi, and Mana. Right? So anytime that you then try to come out of that cycle, anytime that you try to come out of that cycle, what happens is Tanha, Ditthi, Mana, then comes to the rescue of the being, the self, and brings you right back. Yeah. Does that make sense, everyone?
So, Bhante, can the vasana be like kusala karma, previous kusala force of kusala karma?
No, it can't. Now, there is a pattern of thought. There is a pattern of thought where I can't remember which Sayadaw it was, but he suggests that there can be kusala vasana, right? But kusala vasana, but the majority, or the belief of the majority, is the fact that there is only akusala anusaya. Did you say kusala vasana or anusaya, Shriyani?
Kusala.
Kusala as an anusaya or a vasana?
Vasana. Pera.
Kusala vasana, yes, there can be kusala vasana.
Pera kusala vasana. Kusala. Force of the kusala karma.
Yes, kusala vasana, there can be kusala vasana.
But that's nicely explained in this Wikipedia. It means a habit, what Sriyan is asking. It means a habitual tendency, is vasana, subtle inclination that are imprinted in the mind like a stain. For example, now this is akusala. If someone smokes, there will be a habitual tendency for an urge to smoke every day, usually around the same time. But there are other things. Why some people are kind by nature, so that's a kusala, and others are cruel. It's a tendency to behave in a certain way that will trigger similar actions in the future. So that is kusala and asana, because if you're unkind, that's an akusala vasana. But if you are a tendency to be very kind, that is a kusala vasana. That's what Sriyani asked. So vasana can be wholesome and unwholesome. Yeah. So you're right there, because vasana can be, because some people are kind by nature. So that's a kusala vasana. And other people tend to be cruel by nature and it tends to behave.
No, that is not true. Vasana is not created like that. Just because, for example, just because I have received an upbringing of good mannerism and I live with good mannerisms, that does not mean that my mannerisms come into being because of my kusala vasana. Vasana is far more longer than that, right? Now, vasana is only cultivated and developed over lifetimes, not 1 or 2 lifetimes, many hundreds of lifetimes, right? It is a strong impression. Just think about it. It is an impression that even arahants can't get rid of.
Yeah.
Just think about that. Forget about arahants. Pacheka Buddhas can't get rid of vasana. Only Buddhas. So it is not something that you just do it in one birth or over a couple of decades and no, it is constantly done across birth after birth for 100, maybe even 1,000 births, maybe even more, right? And then it becomes a vasana.
So it comes through the bhava. From bhava to
through
bhava.
repetition over a very long period of time.
Through the bhava, yeah, okay.
Bhante, in this, that's what it says. It's a latent energy resulting from actions over a long time, which becomes imprinted in the subject storehouse of consciousness. So it doesn't refer it to 1 or 2 births or because your parents brought you up. It is referring to that accumulation of over several births of these habitual tendencies is believed to predispose one to this, is believed to be predisposed to its pattern of behavior. So it is over long periods of time, not because you were brought up properly in this birth or 2 births. It suggests that, but you can have sort of some good tendencies and some bad over eons of times, I suppose, Bhante. I don't know. That's what it indicates in this Wikipedia, which may not be right. It's not a Dhamma book, but it does indicate that it's for lifetimes. You can have kusala vasanavas or akusala vasanavas imprinted. I mean, calling somebody a vasala because it's not a good thing, derogatory term. So that would be an akusala vasana over lifetimes that even as an arahant you haven't got rid of. Bhante. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you very much for your explanation.
All right, that is all the time that we have for today. We will continue the rest of the sutra next time, okay? And so it's
Saranai.
Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
I will see you all for meditation tomorrow morning, everyone.
Thank you, Bhante. Tervan Saranai.